Hi, this is Sherry Thrower with the Grove Jesus Music, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music with Bob Bender.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today is the legendary country recording artist Buddy Jewell, who has released the 20-year anniversary version of his hit single, Sweet Southern Comfort, which also features Clint Black, the Bellamy Brothers, and Marty Raybon from Shenandoah. Buddy was the very first winner of USA Network's hit reality show Nashville Star. Jewell was the true viewer favorite from the very beginning, capturing 65% of the nationwide voting and beating out 11 other contestants, most notably Miranda Lambert. That's pretty cool in itself.
That's very cool.
By over 2 million votes on the final episode that season. His self-titled Columbia Records debut release landed at #1 on the Billboard Top Country Album charts, was certified gold later that same year, and garnered 2 back-to-back top 5 hits with the singles Sweet Southern Comfort and Help Pour Out the Rain, with both tunes being RIAA certified at 1 million radio airplays. But he's been recognized by the Grammys, the ACMs, the CMAs, ABC radio networks, ICMA, ICGMA, and CMT with multiple awards and nominations over the years. In 2011, he won the International Country Gospel Music Association's Entertainer of the Year and Crossover Artist of the Year awards. He's been on several USO tours, including to remote forward operating bases on the front lines in Iraq, Kuwait, and Afghanistan. Thank you very much for doing that. As a parent of kids in the military, it is truly appreciated, and has served as a spokesperson for the Minnie Pearl Cancer Foundation and Compassion International. Buddy, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, Bob.
We'll get a little confused here today because Buddy, the music dog, is in the studio too.
Well, if you tell me to lay down or sit,
Buddy,
I'll
will you
hope
lay
it's
down?
for him.
Yeah. So we just wanted to clarify that to the listeners real quick. You're an Arkansas boy originally.
Yes.
And what were your early days like growing up in Arkansas?
You know, I did. We moved around a little bit when I was a kid, but we settled in Osceola, Arkansas, in the northeast corner when I was in 4th grade. My mom and dad grew up in a little town about 20 miles from there, Dice, Arkansas, his hometown of Johnny Cash.
Okay.
And so Osceola was predominantly, there's a lot of agriculture. A lot of soybeans and cotton, and one huge American greetings card factory there. If you didn't work there, somebody in your family did.
Wow.
And so it wasn't exactly picturesque, but it was a lot more Mayberry than a lot of places are nowadays.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Your first guitar, I read up on this and I thought, okay, that's very unique. You actually got that from a school friend?
Yeah, it's funny. I just got back from Ireland on a trip with a bunch of my fans, and one of my friends from the 4th grade, Laurie Pollock, was on the trip with us, and she was talking about Chucky McBride, the guy that sold me that guitar
What
for
was
$10.
his name?
Chucky McBride.
We got to give a shout out to Chucky.
Absolutely, yeah, he was great. But yeah, sold me a $10 guitar.
That was your first guitar.
That's my first guitar. The neck was warped. He didn't know it, and I didn't either.
And not knowing didn't make any difference.
Apparently not.
Yeah. And then you saved money bagging groceries to buy guitar lesson books.
Yeah, I still can't read music, but I can, I would buy where it showed the chord charts and the neck of the guitar and little dots on it. It was like the precursor to the Roy Clark Big Note songbook thing. So,
right.
But that's how I learned to play songs that I really liked.
And I was going to say, when I was a kid, I had a 6-string nylon guitar, but it only had 5 strings because one of the pegs was broken.
Right.
And I learned it the same way, and just where the finger needed to go and there was no string, you just still did it. But it worked.
Yeah.
So early on in your career, this is another little tidbit I found about you. You worked at Six Flags Over Texas Amusement Park, but you actually had a very special role there.
I did. I actually worked there 3 years. The first year I was in a stage show, a comedy dance musical type thing. They hired me for my singing, not my dancing. And then the second year, where I worked at was in the Texas section, and across the road from us was the gunfight show. And all those guys, wear long hair and smell like, gunpowder and all this, and they were more to my liking. So the next year I went to work with those guys. And I did that for 2 years.
You were a gunfighter.
I was a gunfighter slash comedian.
That's quite the career move there, isn't it?
It was. I survived to tell about it.
You, at one point, went on a competition TV show, music competition TV show, but it wasn't Nashville Star. It was actually Star Search before moving to Tennessee.
Yeah, that was I auditioned, I think it was in 92, and then we moved to Nashville in 93. I hadn't heard anything from them in months, and then about 3 or 4 months after we got to Nashville, they said, hey, we're going to have you on the show. And I went and filmed, and then just 6 months later it aired. I won 3. I was a male vocalist champion for 3 shows on it. I was just talking to Mark Miller about that the other day. They had their 40-year anniversary for Sawyer Brown, and I was telling him I was an alum as well. I just didn't go as far as those boys
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, Mark Miller and I think Leanne Rimes were both on Star Search.
I'll tell you, someone was on when I was on was a very young Usher. He was 5 years old, I think, when I was on. Yeah, he was on the same season or whatever that I was in. Yeah.
Wow. Small world.
Very small world.
Yeah. Upon arriving to Nashville, you became a demo singer. And when I saw the number of demo recordings that you did over 5,000.
Well, someone that added an extra 1,000. I quit counting at 4,000.
You quit counting.
I definitely did 4,000. I don't know if I did 5,000. I just quit counting.
Yeah. And some of those were for such notable artists as George Strait, Leanne Womack, Gary Allan, and Clay Walker. So let's talk about how did that all come about? First of all, it's a lot of demos, and even if we just cap it at 4,000, but how did that come about that was your gig?
Well, it was really a lie started it all.
Your lie or somebody else's?
I lied to somebody. So it was in church too, so it makes it even worse. I lied in church. I was singing in the choir at the church we were going to, with the stole and the robe and everything. And I come down and I sang a special during the service that day, and I walked down to say hi to somebody, whatever. And this guy with really fuzzy hair, he kind of like hair bearer to me, he walked up and I knew who he was. And he said, this is kind of a weird place to ask this question, but have you ever sang any demos? And at that point in time, I hadn't. I knew what they were. I wanted to sing demos, but I hadn't. But it was Don Slitz. And
my God.
I said, yeah, sure. And then I've had to confess that to the good Lord every time I tell this story. I hope he's forgiven me since. But I sang my first demo was for Don and Fred Knobloch, and I think Craig Bickert had written this song that they hired me to demo. And then a guy named Richard, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've forgotten Richard's last name. Anyway, a gentleman that wrote for BMG started hiring me for demos. He saw me playing at a little pizza place out west of town. Richard Ross, thank you, Lord. He came in to get a pizza. I was playing out there in Kingston Springs and started hiring me to sing demos. And he would call people on the phone. This is back before digital. It was literally still cassette tapes. And he would say, you got to listen to this guy and make them listen to the song over the phone. And then my phone started ringing. So Richard Ross was really responsible for my demo career more than anybody else.
When you were singing these demos, like for George Strait or Leanne Womack, did you know at that time, because those were hits?
Oh, yeah.
That you were
Number
singing
ones, yeah.
on. Did you know they were hits at that point, or do you have an idea?
No, I tell you what, I thought Little Past Little Rock was a great song. I really did. Being honest with you, write this down. I thought, it's a good song. George probably made a great song.
Did you know you were singing it for George, or were they
no.
pitching it at that point?
The Clay Walker song was another one I thought was going to be a hit, and it was a top 5. So, but yeah, I missed more than I got. And I sang a lot of really bad songs, but they all paid the same,
Yeah, what do you care, right?
That's right. Just did the best job I could either way.
You come about and you get on Nashville Star. So we know you won, but let's talk about how you got on that first of all. How did that process come about?
Well, church was involved again. I just didn't have to lie this time. Another
Good, because
guy,
God may have said something at that point.
another guy named Richard, by the way, Richard Johnson, would see me at church and say, "Hey, they're doing this new reality TV show like American Idol. American Idol had its first year. And it's like American Idol, but it's for country singer-songwriters. You ought to get involved." And I'm like, okay, I did the Ed McMahon thing. Nothing happened. I was in the Alabama June Jam talent search. I won the Dallas regional thing when I was living in Dallas, and went to Fort Payne for the finals and came in second. Nothing happened. I did all these, these contests, and nothing ever happened. And so I just kind of blew them off. But, 2 or 3 weeks in a row, when I get to church, I go, "Hey, you going to do that show?" And finally, literally, just so Richard would leave me alone, I said, "Okay, I'll go audition." And even the day that I was supposed to audition, I remember I called my wife, and I was downtown picking up some CDs or cassettes. I think I'm still doing both at the same time. For studio work, 'cause I had a really heavy studio schedule, a lot of songs to record. And I called her and said, I'm not going to go do this goofy TV thing. I've got a lot of songs I got to learn this week. And, besides that, if I make it onto the show, I don't see where they're paying you anything to be on the show. And I could be stuck there for 9 weeks. How are we we had just moved. Like, how are we going to pay, our bills for 2 months if I make it on the show? I didn't know they were going to pay us weekly. A little salary. It wasn't much, but it was good money.
A little bit of a stipend.
Yeah. And so I said, so I'm not going to do it. And I hung up. And about 5 minutes later, she called me back and she said, "You know what? We left Texas to come here to get you a record deal. And until we try, unless we're going to try, give everything chance that comes along, the opportunity to unfold, we might as well go back to Texas." And I said, "Okay, I'll go audition." And I did. So that's the reason I'm sitting there talking to you today.
The first episode of Nashville Star, do you kind of get an idea that something magical is about to happen here?
Being very honest with you, I was so afraid because I was the oldest person on the show, and I thought I was going to be voted off every Saturday night. So, and it was live. As you guys were watching on television live, it was going down, and nobody knew until the last commercial break before they voted somebody off. And then as they were coming back from the break, they would tell the cameraman, "Hey, here's who's going, focus on them."
So you didn't know, but the cameraman knew.
Oh, no, and the cameraman didn't know till about 15 seconds before everybody else knew. So it was really, obviously the producers knew. I don't even think Nancy O'Dell, who was the host, I don't think she knew either. She had is it an IBF or whatever? They entered
in their ear.
Yeah, and they're, okay, so we're voting off so-and-so. And so she's got to go, and going home tonight is blah, blah, blah. But I thought every Saturday night until I got to sing "Help Pour Out the Rain" on the show. And that's when it hit me that I had a chance of winning.
Now, was "Help Pour Out the Rain," was that a cut that you had written on, or was that somebody else?
Yeah, I wrote that song about my daughter. It's a true story. And the night that I sang it on the show, of course, we were sequestered. It's like American Idol meets Survivor meets Big Brother.
Really?
Yeah, so we were down at a big house down on 18th Avenue, all 12 of us, and you couldn't go home. You had to stay there the whole time unless they took you out, and they gave us a little time off here and there, but it was like I couldn't go sleep in my own bed.
So it was like a sequestered jury.
Oh, yeah, and you couldn't work, none of the others. And that's kind of the way it was. But my wife called me the night after the show, and she said, "You're not going to believe this," but she said, "Our website is going nuts." She said, "It keeps crashing. I'll download 10,000 messages or emails. It'll crash, and I'll start it back up, and it crashes again." And she said, "There are all these people messaging about Lacey's song," was what the original name was. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I may have written a hit song and I didn't even know it.
Didn't even know it, yeah.
That's what happened.
The week that came down to you and one other person. Do you remember who the other person was?
There were actually three of us. Is myself, my friend John Arthur Martinez, and Miranda Lambert.
What was that moment like?
Well, I tell you what, the moment that they announced me the winner was almost anticlimactic because I thought she was going to win, and they voted her off first, and it was just John Arthur and I left. And so when she went, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a 50-50 ball here, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there just going, I know she's going to call John Arthur's name. And then when I hear my name, I'm like, oh, I cannot believe this. It was like this whole out-of-body thing going on, man. It was this warm, fuzzy thing all around me. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. After all these years and all this work, I was 42 years old. After all the years I've put in, it's finally paid off. You know, and then the journey started. You know?
And who were the judges? You had some names.
Oh, we did. Robert K. Orman. He was one of the judges. Tracy Gershon was another one. Charlie Robinson, who we just lost here a few weeks ago, was the third judge, and they were tough on us. You know, and so if you made it through, I think the first 3 episodes, they voted people off. And then after the 3rd episode, it was all up to the American public. And so I didn't find out about the 65% thing until obviously after the show was over with. But the producer, somebody told me, hey, we knew you were going to win after the first show. And I'm like, well, how did you know that?
Wow.
And they said, you were 1 million votes ahead of anybody else.
Wow.
And every week it was that way. You know, the lead just grew, but they couldn't tell me.
They couldn't tell you.
No, and you know what? And they did a great job of hiding it because I had no idea. I was scared to death every Saturday.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Buddy Jewell.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook, 101 Ways to Help You Improve Your Chances of Success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena, and believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics, all written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message. Thanks.
Since 1963, Korg has been creating new experiences in music and performance. That is what drove the creation of some of Korg's most legendary products, such as the Poly 6, the M1, the Electribe, the Triton, the Minilog, the Kronos, Wave State, Op6, and most recently the Nautilus, which is what we have here in our studio. Korg is dedicated to creating new, innovative, and uncompromising instruments which maintain the highest quality to inspire music makers, past, present, and future. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products and start creating new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, not only do we have Buddy the Music Dog wandering around aimlessly, but we got Buddy Jewell sitting across the table from us here. Upon winning Nashville Star, you released that song, your debut single, Help Pour Out the Rain, which actually became the highest debuting single by a new country artist since the single charts had been formed by Nielsen SoundScan. The first night you sang on Help Pour Out the Rain, you mentioned that it literally crashed your website. Were you at that point, were you signed to a record label by then when that was released?
Oh, no, none of them wanted me. Even Sony, that backed the show, didn't want me. They had passed on me a couple of times.
So you released this without any label backing?
Well, essentially, so here's the thing. So the show ended on May the 3rd. May the 5th, the digital single went out. Friday, May the 2nd, we were at rehearsals. The producers came in and said, just so you know, Sony just axed all of the upper echelon there at the record label. So everybody's gone. So from the president on down, and I think they kept some of the A&R people, but even some of them were gone. And it was the ones who'd passed on me. But so they said, hey, but don't worry. They got some great people coming in, and whoever wins is going to yada, yada. And so it was, so my, I'm trying to remember the gentleman who was the president at the time, John Grady. When John always said, my first day at work was Buddy's first day at work. We both came to work on that Monday, the 5th. And he got behind me, and they made things happen. But the song had already taken a life of its own. You had radio. We went from worrying about radio except in the winter to radio saying, when can we play the song? And that was an incredible thing. That doesn't happen in country music or probably any other genres.
Yeah, not very much, does it? Yeah. So let's fast forward, because one of the reasons that you're here today is your hit, Sweet Southern Comfort. You've actually done a reboot on it. Yeah. And as we mentioned previously, you've got some pretty notable names that are singing, and I listened to it and I went, yeah, this. And my wife, who was in the other room, goes, who is that? That's a great song. And she kind of remembered it from when it was first released, but now it's got a whole new spin. Why the reboot of that song?
Well, this year, May the 3rd was the 20th anniversary of me winning the show. It was also, the song came out May the 5th, Help Ride the Rain did, and then Sweet Southern Comfort debuted back on October the 17th of 2003. So it was a 20-year anniversary for all of that. And so we decided that we should do a re-record of it. And although I love Help Pour Out the Rain, it didn't really lend itself to having the other vocalists on it. But Sweet Southern Comfort was perfect for it. And since Clint Blackwood produced the first record, I wish they'd let him produce the other one as well. But he was my first call because, the song was a hit, partly because he worked on it. I felt like, he was part of the equation. Clint and I've kept up with each other over 20 years and, text and talk and call every now and then. Not a whole bunch, but, I still consider him a friend. I hope he feels the same way about me. I think he does, or he wouldn't have, done this for me. But he right away said, man, I'd love to do it. Tell me what you want me to do. How can I help? And then Marty came on board through some friendships of mine. And then, lo and behold, I had just opened a show for the Bellamy Brothers right about the time that we were deciding to do this. And so I had never really spent a whole lot of time around Dave and Howard, but I got to spend time with them on their bus this time after the show, and we visited for a while. And so just a week or two later, I thought, well, shoot, all I can do is say no. And so I text David, and they said, yeah. So
just like that.
Yeah, it was. I'm still blown away that I got that much talent on this record with me. And I didn't even think about it, Bob, until I guess a couple months later we're getting ready to shoot the video for it. And I realized that we had 4 decades of country music. The Bellamy's from the 70s, Marty from the 80s, Clint from the 90s, and me for the 2000s. And it's just kind of, as well as God things, it just worked out that way.
Yeah. Kismet.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously, Clint Black was an obvious choice. The Bellamy Brothers just came out of a conversation, and Marty Rabin was through a friend. Were you even thinking of using those people to record this song?
When the gentleman who came with the idea, Brandon Steen, first approached me about it, I automatically thought of Clint. And then he said, who else can you get? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me put some feelers out. And I asked... In total, there were literally 6 artists that I asked about it, and One of them I never heard back from. Another one said they were interested, but then when it came down to it, they didn't respond. And then the other artist group or whatever, their manager responded, but never got back to me saying that they were in. And so I went with who came forward and said, yeah, I'll do it. And I'm tickled to death that I got who I got.
Isn't the music business wonderful?
Yeah.
It's like that a lot. People, yeah, I want to be involved in this project. I want to do something, but then the follow through just doesn't seem to be there. And then they wonder why maybe their career's not doing so well.
Well, and sometimes I know from my perspective, I always wanted to know what was going on, especially with management. I wasn't always privy to all that, or there wouldn't have been some decisions made early on that got made if I known that they were turning stuff down or whatever. So I don't really fault the artist because of the three that I asked that didn't respond the second time. Only one of them did I personally contact, and they just never responded at all. And it's one of those things where they're getting a million text messages from people all day long. I haven't texted any of these folks, in probably 4 or 5 years, and all of a sudden I pop up and go, "Hey, you want to do this?" I don't really blame them. It worked out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah.
I tell you what, if I decide to do another one, I'll ask the other three again, and we'll see if they make a different.
Well, I got
a different assessment.
This selection of artists that you had, it seems to be a natural fit, actually.
Feels good.
I don't know how the recording process went, but when you listen to the song, it really seems to be like a seamless effort.
Well, I'm glad it came out that way, and I credit Bart Bush and Mitchell Brown, who produced it and engineered it and everything for all that, because all of us recorded at different times in different studios.
So you weren't in the studio. You weren't in the studio at the same time as them.
No, I would have loved to have had that moment, because then we could have done the video thing, the typical, the guy behind the microphone with the baseball cap and the earphones on.
Yeah,
but we couldn't get that. So I had to chase them all down, it was harder to get them to video for the video than it was to do the singing, because they just went to whatever studio they were comfortable with. Clint, I'm sure, did his at his house, and I'm not sure whether Bellamy's did theirs, and I know who Marty did his with, but. Yeah, when it came time for the video, man, and Marty was the hardest one to chase down because Shenandoah was just slamming it on the road. I literally had to meet him at their bus one night and catch him outside the bus while they were waiting for the rest of the band to get there, and the videographer and I shoot a conversation on the back of a pickup truck, to go to the video. So, but it was great, man. The Bellamy's were wonderful. They were in town for the Opry, and I went and met them at their hotel and took them over to my daughter's in-laws' house to film over there, because they got this, my buddy Ronnie, I call him my outlaw, the co-father-in-law, has this great outdoor man cave thing that I thought this would be perfect. It's got the big fireplace and all this stuff. And we went there, and the videographer chose the barn behind it instead. So, but it all worked out great. We went to Clint's house and filmed, and it was really cool.
I also understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, your son, Buddy the Third,
yes,
played drums on this project.
He did. Buddy's a great singer. By the way, everybody's listening, he has a group of his own called Grand Division. He goes by Buddy Gray, so he doesn't have to compete with Buddy Jewell.
That would get really confusing in the studio today, wouldn't it?
It's been confusing since I was a kid. My dad was Buddy. But he's a great singer. He plays drums for me on the road, and Buddy is not a country-sounding singer. He's more like John Mayer, Adam Levine, has this beautiful high voice, but he's a great drummer, and so it's great to have him on the road with me.
And you got him in the studio.
Yeah, that was really, they wanted to bring in studio musicians. I said, no. I said, my bands, if they're good enough to play on stage with me every night, they're good enough to do this in the studio. And several of the guys already did studio work when they weren't on the road anyway. And I'm like, I'm not doing this with anybody else except my band. And my son was probably the point of contention. And I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give him a shot at it. And I'm going to tell him, hey, if you don't cut it, then, I don't want you to be upset if they replace you, but I want you to have this opportunity. And he did just fine. He plays the song every night on the road. I'd had no doubt he'd be able to do it in the studio as well. So it was great, though.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors, and when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Buddy Jewell.
You're listening to the business side of music.
It may have been Tammy Wynette who sang Stand By Your Man, but it was actually Nancy Jones who stood by the legendary George Jones for more than 30 years and helped bring him to the light. Now in her new book, Playin' Possum, readers get an intimate look at the country music legend through the eyes of his wife and partner. Nancy knew George Jones better than anyone. The good and the bad, the horrendous and the hilarious. Married in 1983, George quit his wild and wicked ways for a while, but Nancy learned all too soon that there were demons holding a strong grip on the man she loved. People who knew the possum credit Nancy's tenacious love, faith, and encouragement for saving George's life and rebuilding his career. For the first time in Playin' Possum, Nancy Jones reveals the true insider perspective and little-known stories about the country music legend, his battles with cocaine, alcohol, abusive behavior, battles with himself, and against the demons that sought to control and destroy him. Read the compelling first-hand account from the woman who refused to give up on George Jones. Playin' Possum is available now. Order your copy today from nancyjonesbooks.com, Amazon, and more.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives, whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Buddy Jewell is sitting across the podcast table. During the break, you threw something at me that I didn't know there is a Cash connection.
As in Johnny Cash, yeah. Unfortunately, I never got to meet him, but my mom and dad grew up with him and his family in the little town of Dice, Arkansas that I mentioned earlier. That the town was so small that everybody knew everybody, and the Cashes were friends with the Jewells and vice versa. You know, my Uncle Hubert, my dad's oldest brother, and Johnny were really good friends. Tommy and Dad played basketball together, and Reba, one of his sisters, used to go to my mom's house to play the piano. So there was that connection, and I grew up a big Johnny Cash fan, and thought I was going to finally get to meet him at the CMAs that year in 2003. I was up for the Horizon Award, and he was going to be on the show, and then he passed away. I think it was September of that year, and of course they did the show. I think it was in November. And then, ironically, that night at the show, the entire Cash family sat right behind me.
Oh my gosh!
And so I would have worn him out during every commercial break. I'd have been after him. But so there's that connection, and the first song I ever learned to sing when I was a kid, I was in the third grade. I learned it for a talent show. It was a Johnny Cash song, "I Still Miss Someone." And then when the show came along, I actually chickened out and didn't go sing. And then I wound up, because of my Johnny Cash connection, I got hooked up with a great artist, Thomas Gabriel, who's Johnny's oldest grandson.
Right.
And Thomas and I met. We got hired to go open a Johnny Cash museum in Denmark last year in 2022, and became fast friends. So there's that whole thing right there. But yeah, it's been a very interesting piece of non-history, I guess, because I never got to meet him.
And what's really interesting, two things, first of all, is Tommy Cash and then Joanne Cash are entertainers in their own right. Of course, Joanna's a gospel artist, and Tommy was kind of always in the shadow of Johnny. He could never really get out on his own.
Yeah,
because
even the Six White Horses didn't.
Yeah, because brother was in the way, and I get it. Johnny he had that it factor. He had what so many people achieved. When we talk about Dyers, Arkansas, here's my little useless trivia for the day on that one. I was on a tour bus traveling from Nashville to California to do some dates, and our tour bus broke down just right outside of
Dyess.
Dyess, Arkansas. And I remember sitting there on the side of the road while we're waiting for the replacement tour bus to show up, thinking, there's literally nothing here. And this was like 1995, 96, maybe. Not much had changed.
Cotton fields and soybeans. I mean, it's flat as a pancake. You know, you go back and read the history of Dyess. It was established in the 30s, right after the Great Depression. Eleanor Roosevelt came there to dedicate the town in 1935.
Really?
They took 500 families off the welfare roll. It was a socialist experiment. Everybody got the same house, the same amount of acreage. A house, a barn, a smokehouse, and the same amount of acreage to farm. You had to clear, I think you got 40 acres, had to clear 20 of it to farm. And as all great socialist projects do, it failed. So...
Well, we won't go down that path. So what's next for Buddy Jewell? I know you get asked that a lot, but our listeners want to know.
Well, I'm obviously I'm currently touring. I finally, after COVID has gotten out of the picture, so to speak, I've been back to Europe a lot this year already. I just got back from Ireland. I've been in Denmark, Sweden, the Faroe Islands so far prior to that, and I'm headed to Spain, Austria, and Germany.
Wow!
Here in a couple of weeks. I'm slowly but surely putting together a new record, and I want to put the new version of Sweet Southern Comfort on it. And I've got a couple of things in the can. I'm trying to take time and write, although it's really hard to come by because, you know, touring just really it sucks all the creative energy out of me. You know, all the traveling and different hotel rooms and stuff like that. I'm not griping about it. It makes it hard to write. But I'm not in a big hurry. But I've got some really great stuff that we're going to put on this record, and I think people are really going to love it.
What do you enjoy more? Do you enjoy writing or do you enjoy touring or performing?
I definitely enjoy performing the time that I'm on stage. You know, people, and you know this, they think, oh, he just rides around on a bus and sings for an hour, you know, every Friday and Saturday night. And that's all he does. Well, that's the easy part. And the thing that we look forward to the most is walking on stage and having that 60 minutes, 90 minutes or whatever, just to be out there, you know, with a live crowd and feeding off of them. And I enjoy that so much. The other part that I really love, honestly, because of doing all the studio work, is I love the recording process. I don't want to be around for drum check.
Yeah, you and me both, brother.
Or all the cleanup, but I like to be there for the magic part when the music is being made and then singing, of course. But that's really, really, I love that part.
When I was producing in the studio, my wife would go with me, and we would go in to set up drums and tune and do the check, and she'd like, oh, Lord, I'm going to go take a nap. This is going to take an hour or two.
Yeah. It takes a lot of patience as a drummer and as an engineer.
And as a producer.
Yeah, and as a producer. Good point.
How can people find out your tour schedule and all that good stuff about you?
The first place I send folks is my website, buddyjewell.com.
And it's not crashing these days.
No, it's not. We were actually paying for it differently. It's not by the bandwidth anymore. But Jewell has two L's. It's Jewell. I am the Buddy Jewell, all lowercase, one word, on Instagram. I'm Buddy Jewell on Facebook, minus all the numbers and other goofy things put in it and try to, be imposters. I can't imagine what happens to guys that are really famous. And then on X, I am at Buddy Jewell with two L's.
I want to give a shout out to our loyal listeners. Without you, we wouldn't be one of the most listened to music industry interview podcasts in the world, including #1 in many countries around the world. If you enjoy our show, check out our Facebook page at the Business Side of Music Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and definitely hit the like button. While you're at it, please go to our page on YouTube and click on the Business Side of Music Podcast to subscribe. You can check out our webcasts on there and get to see me and guests such as Buddy Jewell in the studio and Buddy the Music Dog. We won't forget him. Last but not least, check out and follow us on Twitter at Biz Music Podcast. That's BIZ Music Podcast. Buddy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, man, thanks for the free commercial for me. I appreciate it, Bob.
Anytime.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.
Play something we can dance to.